Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic, from real to fake, the effects of artificial intelligence on the human brain. So we're going to be filtering this entire show through that lens of whether or not we have been desensitized to AI, which I absolutely believe we have. And I believe I found a little bit of a pattern in how this has happened over time. We have absolutely allowed AI to introduce itself, artificial intelligence to come in and replace actual intelligence. And we have to talk about it. And we have to talk about what this means for us in the future. What's going to happen? What does this mean for the human spirit and the human soul? And I close the show with a very excellent explanation of how AI can disrupt the human spirit, creativity, and all the things that make us who we are. But first, let's get into some current events. Let's start with the current events that's making the biggest splash right now, and that's the Epstein list. So, Attorney General Pam Bondi released flight logs and other documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, but these files were unlikely to provide any new information on his sex trafficking case, according to the Justice Department. The documents included flight logs, it included redacted or a redacted address book, which were largely known to the public from earlier sources. Before the public release, binders labeled the Epstein Files Part 1 were given to public commentators and podcasters at the White House, which has drawn criticism for the lack of new content. Representative Anna Paulina Luna criticized the release as a complete disappointment, highlighting the unmet expectations from those seeking new revelations about Epstein's activities. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi reported receiving a truckload of Jeffrey Epstein files from the FBI after a previous document release was inadequate. As a result of all the criticism, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has responded by stating that she was uninformed as to why they were not providing all the information. So since then, she has received, according to her, a truckload of Jeffrey Epstein files from the FBI after a previous document release, the one that everyone was upset about, was inadequate. So Bondi stated that her team will review the files quickly while aiming to protect Epstein's victims. Bondi criticized the Biden administration for not pursuing justice on Epstein's victims or for Epstein's victims. Bondi emphasized a new approach to redaction, stating, "What we're going to do is not just pull pages out like they used to." So great. I guess she's going to now provide us with whatever we need and not have a whole bunch of the black highlighter that everyone talks about. But here's my take. I really want this administration to take a deep breath. I want them to understand that while we have to move quickly, we need to make sure we're precise. And precision sometimes does take a little bit longer than just kind of going out there and being the bull in the china shop. We have an entire 4 years, and yes, there's a lot to get done in those 4 years, so it's going to have to move pretty quickly. But it's not fair to the American people when there's a lot of the rollouts and pullbacks and rollouts and pullbacks. It almost appears as though there is chaos rather than harmony. And harmony is what allows people to get on board with what's happening with these decisions. So I really want this administration to keep doing all the great things that they're doing, but I want them to make sure they're doing it right. And so don't tell us you're doing something if there's a potential of that not happening or not working out, because it only breeds the distrust that we have felt for so long, while we also want the transparency. And I don't want to feel like I'm a kid in the room watching my parents fight all the time. There has to be a balance of harmony in the midst of this chaos, which is why what I believe keeps societies in balance. All right, next current topic, Zelensky, you're up next. Well, we all saw the heated debate between President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump, as well as VP JD Vance, which we'll get to that. But during this heated exchange, President Donald Trump called for an immediate ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, warning Ukrainian President Zelensky to make peace or risk losing support from the US government. Zelensky stated that he cannot trust Russian President Putin to abide by peace agreements, claiming Putin has broken 25 peace agreements in the past. Trump criticized Zelensky for being disrespectful during the tense meeting and canceled the minerals deal that was important to Ukraine's reconstruction. Senate leader Chuck Schumer criticized Trump, stating that he and Vance are doing Putin's dirty work. President Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine following his clash with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, according to White House officials. The decision to pause military aid aims to pressure Ukraine to resume peace negotiations. Trump described the situation as a great deal for us and plans to address this later on. So here's my take. Well, let me first start with Zelensky. I'm personally not a fan of Zelensky because I don't think it looked good to have him on the cover of magazines, to be piping him in to award shows, his wife going on shopping sprees, and all these things during the time where his country is at war, while he would come to the White House dressed as if he's in combat, but then we will see him on red carpets and doing things outside of the war. So I don't like the perception that you are deeply involved in the war, while also looking as though you are spending our money on things that is unnecessary. However, that being said, I was not a fan of how this all played out, because I do believe in decorum, and I do believe that there should be some form of decorum. I believe that in order to maintain respect on the main stage, which matters so much, we have to make sure that we're in a position where we are respected. We cannot come off like we are the fat king and everyone needs to bow down to us or get in line. We have to make sure that there's a dance that's going on between our allies and this country. I also believe that arrogance just never looks good on a leader. And I'm gonna be honest, when JD Vance said that he's never said thank you, it came off very arrogant to me. And I don't like arrogance on leaders because that creates a hard fall. Whenever you operate in that type of energy, it's only a matter of time before something happens. And then next thing you know, you have a very hard fall. And the reason being is because it's really hard to maintain that. No one's perfect. There will be mistakes. But most importantly, we are strong not only because of our military, not only because of the wealth that's in this country. We have the most millionaires and billionaires of any other country, but also because of the fact that we have our allies. And what you don't want is for the allies to come together and start saying things like, man, I think America's getting a little too big for their britches. Because then what happens there is it creates a issue, it creates resentment. And what we don't want is our allies to then team up and turn on us, because then we won't be in the position that we're in. So I really just want us to look at these situations. I understand there will be times where it is just going to be emotional, but I want us to look at those situations and do what's right and do what's best for the totality of the conversation, the totality of the challenge, rather than what's great in the moment. Finally, let's end on something that is a little bit shocking, but is it real? And what am I referring to? It's not AI, not yet. We're going to get to AI. But I'm talking about cloud seeding. Have you heard about it? So cloud seeding is a weather modification technique aimed at enhancing precipitation from clouds. It involves introducing substances like silver iodide and sodium chloride into the atmosphere to encourage the formation of rain or snow by providing nuclei or for water droplets to condense around. Very scientific, very over my head. However, this is what they're doing. Cloud seeding is actively practiced in various regions to mitigate drought, enhance snowpack for water supplies, and suppress hail. Countries such as here, the United States, China, United Arab Emirates, and Australia are using these cloud seeding programs.
Some of these clouds, by nature, sometimes it rains, for example, only 40 to 50% of its rain that processed in the cloud that comes as rainfall. So by these operations, we try to increase this amount by, for example, from 15 to 30%.
So how does it work? It starts here, inside the National Center of Meteorology, where a team is constantly monitoring forecasts, looking for potential clouds to seed. The operations only work with cumulus clouds, which are vertical in shape.
Research 5 operation, can you read me?
Once they spot a cloud, they radio the pilots, who then take to the air armed with hydroscopic flares filled with a mixture of potassium chloride, sodium chloride, magnesium, and other materials. It's essentially salt. When the plane reaches the right clouds, the pilots release the flares.
These salts basically attracts the moisture and try to make it condense. So these particles becomes nuclei of condensation. And then when these droplets condense, and then they hit each other, and then they form a bigger droplet that the air cannot hold it any longer in the air. So it forms as cloud.
Just last month, the state of Montana was considering cloud seeding to improve snowpack in the Big Hold watershed. The Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, DNRC, is conducting a study to assess the feasibility of cloud seeding. The DNRC estimates that cloud seeding could increase snowpack by 10 to 15%. Michael Downey from the DNRC views cloud seeding as a valuable tool for water management to help reduce water shortages. Critics question the long-term ecological impact of substances like silver iodide. It's not fully understood, and people are really wondering if there are potential risks that this could have towards the ecosystem and our water quality. But then there's some ethical issues, like manipulating the weather can possibly lead to these unintended consequences, possibly affecting precipitation in neighboring areas or causing disputes over water resources. Here's my take. Much like what we will be discussing after the break, I see cloud seeding as another attempt to control outcomes. And I don't like the idea of man-made actions that can affect others. The weather is something that is unpredictable for a reason. It helps to add this balance to our cycle of life. And having moments of drought as well as intense rain in all a part of this cycle, nature is on its own clock. So those moments where you have drought at one point, then you have intense rain at another, it may not be ideal for everyone and what we're doing conducive for us, but nature is clearly on its own clock. And resetting it or stopping it has to have some type of long-term effects. And I just can't imagine if it's good. Finally, anything artificial is not the real thing. And we have to keep that in mind. The fact that we are not seeing it as that is why I have to do this show. So I'm interested to know how this type of rain will affect crops. How does it affect our food and ultimately affect us? I can't imagine that these crops are not going to know the difference between natural weather and artificial weather. But what do you think? Are you a farmer or someone who loves the idea, or are you concerned about this? Because the weather is not the only thing that's artificial in our lives. It's also our intelligence. How in the world did we get here? How in the world did we all get so comfortable with a tool that thinks for us, that has taken the entire creative portion of our brains and replaced it with artificial creativity? And we've accepted it with very little pushback. And look, now we're being introduced to cloud seeding, which to my understanding has been in the works since the 90s. So how did this happen? We're going to discuss it after the break. You're listening to The Janelle King Show. This is Extra 106.3. Don't change the dial. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and thank you so much for joining us. This is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's kitchen table topic is from real to fake. Is it all fake? The effects of artificial intelligence on the human brain. And before the break, we discussed several current events, and I provided my take, one being on cloud seeding, or the act of creating artificial rain clouds to fight drought. I'm sure LA could have used some of that during those fires, but no, they didn't. It's being directed towards farmers and farmland, which means our food may be growing with artificial rain that has very little research, particularly on whether or not that will affect our food and how that food would affect us. So this is a bit concerning for me. But why are we not fighting this? Like, why aren't we asking more questions? Why aren't we talking about this on a greater scale? But nothing just happens, especially when you're talking about moving a mass group of people in one direction. So this simple thought process sent me on a rabbit trail that kickstarted a lot of thoughts, starting with, why am I personally so comfortable with using AI products? Sometimes it scares me when I see these deep fakes, and it scared me when I first saw them when they first arose. But then I was intrigued when ChatGPT arose. So why didn't it completely turn me off the way deepfakes did? After all, it's very new. It has a lot of concerns. People are still trying to, we're trying to fill it out. But why did I find myself defending something that was just recently made? It didn't even exist until recently, and advocating for how it could be useful. But most interesting is the data that I found on who was embracing AI and who isn't. So based on my data, 85% of Gen Zers, which is ages 9 to 24, are extremely comfortable with using AI technology, 85%, as opposed to 75% of millennials, 55% of Gen Xers, 40% of baby boomers, and 20% of the silent generation are actively using AI. I think it's safe to say that the younger generation is more engaged, and that's not a shocker, simply because the younger generation tends to be more technologically savvy, but the older generation tends to be more corporate and in need of some of these tools. I happen to think that there's more to this story. So artificial intelligence is just that. It's artificial. It's void of emotion. At least today, it's void of emotion. Yet we ask it a question and we accept its response with minimal pushback. And I believe that the acceptance of AI is deeply linked to the rise of the intellectual class and this push towards college attendance and relying on quote unquote experts. Dating back to the 1800s, the establishment of prestigious universities and the expansion of higher education allowed for a greater emphasis on research, scholarship, and liberal arts. Institutions like Johns Hopkins University was founded in 1876. It pioneered research-based education. Post-World War II, and we're talking about the time frame between 1940 and the 1960s, federal funding and the GI Bill led to a significant growth in college attendance and graduate education. The emergence of think tanks and policy analysis further solidified the role of intellectuals in shaping national discourse. By the 1970s, intellectuals engaged in various movements, including civil rights and anti-war protests, which elevated their visibility and influence in society. Moving us to 2025, the intellectual class in America comprises of individuals engaged in analysis, creativity, and thought leadership. While often found in academia, the group also includes public intellectuals, guys, who influence culture, policy, and discourse through various mediums. That's an extreme sharp shift from the 1800s mission to conduct research and advancement. So as we stand today, qualifications for America's intellectual class extend beyond academic degrees. And that's when it becomes a little concerning. It's more so about impactful contributions, writing, teaching, or researching in ways that advance knowledge and understanding. Intellectuals often serve as thought leaders in their respective fields, offering fresh perspectives on complex issues. Schools traditionally known for cultivating intellectuals such as Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. Over time, we have been slowly turned into listening to these individuals and no longer trusting our guts or listening to our own comprehension. And how often do you find yourself having a intellectual, quote, conversation with someone, and then you hear them say, let me Google that, as if Google is the answer of all answers. And we are told that these people provide valuable insights drawn from expert experiences and expertise. But the problem is that I have my own experiences, and what makes your experience more important than mine? The problem is that we have been conditioned, some more than others, to trust the thoughts and the perspectives of others rather than leaning on the facts that existed for a lifetime, such as the discussion around men getting pregnant. I can't even believe we were having that. We all know that men cannot get pregnant. But we all had to sit through years of misgendering claims, of people listing their pronouns all on social media, and men calling themselves women, all because the intellectuals told us so. So here we are. These college-educated individuals went from research and development focused to social engineering, and it cannot happen without mass buy-in. So that leads me to the introduction of fact checkers. To be clear, the origin of fact checking dates back to the 1930s in print journalism, with dedicated departments in notable publications such as The New Yorker. These ethical standards was developed to uphold journalistic integrity. So far away from that. With the expansion of access in the 90s to information online and the corresponding rise of misinformation, the emergence of blogs and the use of generated content has caused these individuals to increase the need for reliable fact checking. In other words, the internet created opportunities for other voices to grow and influence, and that just can't happen because it takes us off of one track focus, which conditions us to be more reliant on technology and less reliant on ourselves. In the 2000s, we saw the launch of Snope.com in 2003, factcheck.org in 2004, and 2008, PolyFact was founded. And by 2010, several online fact-checking organizations such as the Washington Post and the host of media outlets that have fact-checking departments that are used to control political discourse instead of fact-checking themselves came into play. And the use of AI and machine learning to aid in identifying and verifying claims faster was also introduced. So goodbye to individual reasoning and hello, artificial intelligence. And in the 2020s, we were now fully integrated, having fact checking as a standard practice in media reporting, which includes any media commentating or reporting. What's interesting about all of this is that we fought a little bit against the fact checkers, but we didn't realize that we introduced them when we decided to bring in quote unquote experts all the time, rather than holding them accountable to the data or holding them accountable to giving us the facts and not their opinions. We have let it all happen. And now we have an increased partnership between fact-checking organizations and news outlets. Do I believe that this has been a plan since the 1800s? Absolutely not. But the use of the intellectual class has become a tool to assist with getting us to abandon our own reasoning and to lean into the reasoning of the so-called experts. So here we are. We have a ton of individuals who are leaning in to AI. And at this point, we can use AI for almost anything. But I want to share a story with you an article I recently read, and I just kind of summarized it. So bear with me. But I really, really want to share this with you because I think it's extremely important to notate this. In July, Matthew Van Annel received a Discord message from a hacker who knew all of his personal details about him, including private conversations from his workplace while he was working at Disney. The hacker claimed to have had access sensitive information related to Van's personal and professional life. Subsequently, the hacker published over 44 million Disney messages online and leaked Van Annel's personal information, including credit card numbers and social security details, leading to significant financial and emotional distress. And as a result of the breach, Disney's cybersecurity team initiated an investigation, which concluded that Van Annel had accessed inappropriate content on his work computer, a claim he denied. The investigation led to his termination, causing Van to lose his health insurance and substantial amount of income. He attributed the hacking incident to malware hidden in software he downloaded from GitHub, which allowed the hackers to steal his credentials stored in his password manager, 1Password. In the wake of the hack, Van struggled with panic attacks, overwhelming stress, eventually seeking legal recourse against Disney, demanding an 8-figure settlement of loss of wages and emotional distress. The incident raises concerns about cyber security vulnerabilities, especially as people work from home, making their computers potential targets for hackers. So this gentleman experienced what I believe is coming, what I am deeply, deeply concerned about. And it's the idea of us at one point using technology to serve us, but then turning all of our reliance over to technology to where now we are serving it. Larry Ellison, who is over Oracle, he stated at a world government conference that it would be beneficial for other countries to give us or give this AI machine, whatever this is, all of their citizens' information, including their health records, so that they can do a better job of utilizing AI with diagnosis, with prognosis, with financial management, and all kinds of things. So he thinks that is beneficial, that it is extremely helpful to provide all of our information essentially to the government. And just like this gentleman, how could he have fought this? AI has, when you introduce yourself to AI, when you allow AI into your life, you are allowing AI to have all of your personal information. And that machine can mimic you at any point in time. Matter of fact, that's what algorithms are. It's a form of trying to mimic patterns. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in depth with technology, and we were joking about ChatGPT, and she said to me that she introduced herself to ChatGPT, asked what he wanted to be called, asked about how, just introduced herself. She said she uploaded her resume, her bio, and all of those good things. And as a result, some of the stuff that's coming back from AI, so when she asks AI a question, some of the responses are sounding more and more like her. And while that seems to be beneficial and helpful, and she's deeply involved in technology, so I think I trust that she knows how far to go. But think about those who don't. Would you hand over your information? I would like to know, how many of you who are listening, how many of you are utilizing AI? How are you utilizing AI? And do you find it becoming more and more efficient as it relates to communicating with you? How are you utilizing this particular service? But you don't have to take my word for it, because I came across a video where there were a lot of concerns about the long-term effects of AI, particularly on the human spirit, and it's being discussed on a great scale. So I'm going to share that with you after the break. But I want to find out whether or not there are people who are concerned about the emotional toll that this technology can have on us, as well as the physical toll that it can have on us. And I want to know how many people actually understand what AI is. Because much like what I said last week about how we have gotten to a place now where we are purchasing things we don't own. What am I talking about? Any subscription service you have. If you have an online subscription service, you don't own those movies on Netflix, on Hulu. You don't own those books on Kindle or Audible. We think we do, but there's no physical copy. If our account went down, if our phones went down, if technology disappeared, how much of your life will disappear? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. So after the break, I'm going to share a video with you that really hit home for me. And it made me question things. And I think that what we can do is, while we are in a position where we are in control of AI, we must stay there. Thank you so much for listening. Right after the break, we're going to be back, and I'm going to close with this video and final thoughts. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. That's right. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is From Real to Fake: the effects of artificial intelligence on the human brain. I wanted to close the show by sharing a clip from an interview I found regarding long-term effects of AI on the human spirit. Whitney Webb in the video has been known to be a bit controversial. I'm not endorsing all of her research because I can't confirm the validity of all of her claims personally, but I totally agree with her take on this topic. So take a listen to what she thinks about the long-term effects of AI on the human spirit.
So one of those is that AI will they say invariably lead to a division of society. Essentially, they don't use this term, but I will use it, into classes of haves and have-nots. But the way they define it is a little different. So sort of this more elite tier would be the people that determine AI's objective function, that program and develop AI and understand what AI does to people. And then the lower class presumably would be much larger, and that is the class that AI will act upon, but people will lose the ability to know what AI is doing to them. And they argue that this process of people losing the ability to know what AI is doing to them will happen because of this phenomena they refer to as cognitive diminishment, which is sort of this idea, and that's pretty easy to verify. If if you stop doing mental math and use a calculator all the time, it gets harder and harder and harder to do mental math. And the same is true for really like any skill that you don't practice. So they argue that because of the convenience of AI and how it's been creeping into our lives, and I think we've seen this a lot since the advent of generative AI, it will become harder and harder and harder and eventually impossible for people to do certain things, including make decisions for themselves, because the AI will tell you where to go. It will tell you what music to listen to. It will tell you what clothes to buy. And essentially, that's their vision. People will eventually lose the ability to make those decisions for themselves or even develop their own preferences without the assistance of artificial intelligence. And so obviously the way to fight against that is to not outsource all of your decision making and skills to that. And unfortunately, I think as we've seen with the rise of generative AI, people are creating less. People are outsourcing their creativity to AI, have AI make art for me, have AI write things for me. And eventually that leads to a world where in a generation, people don't know how to create art or create music or write without AI. And what does that ultimately mean for humanity? Then essentially we do end up in sort of this helpless state where we become dependent on machines to function. But it only happens if we voluntarily give ourselves over to that type of system and decline to use the abilities granted to us by our consciousness and our souls, and decide to let machines do it for us and have them become the creators and have us just be processors for AI, batteries like the Matrix. I mean, I don't know, but I'd rather not see that come to fruition. And I think the way to avoid that is very easily within the hands of anybody, regardless of your economic status or what your skills are. Everybody can create something. Maybe you whittle things out of wood. Maybe you make music. Maybe you make art, visual art, or other, woven art. I don't know. There's all sorts of things people do. People have always been creating ever since we've existed as a species. And I think if we surrender that, then the post-human future would be an inevitability. And that's essentially what these people are hoping for. And I think it's important for people to fight against that. And I think when people talk about resisting this agenda, this is something that inherently gets left out of that discussion. And I don't think it should be at all. Because again, I don't think people are really reading what a lot of these architects of AI policy are thinking and saying. People are just willingly using it because it's convenient, it's easy, but without really thinking about long-term consequences. And I'm sure people that have been using generative AI, I don't know, in independent media to generate content for your site, has it gotten harder to write those things after using it for a year? Probably. For those people, I would wager. And that type of phenomena is only going to get worse. And what happens when we can't even think for ourselves anymore? Because stopping creating, not being able to write, eventually you're not going to be able to think without the help of this algorithm. And again, as I mentioned earlier, AI is prone to hallucinating, seeing realities that aren't there, and all sorts of things. And how deep could we get dragged into some sort of artificial illusion if we sort of outsource our thinking and our creativity to this type of entity? It's kind of funny because Schmidt and Kissinger argue that these
Guys, what I believe I just heard is that AI can be a great passenger, but it should never be in the driver's seat. So hold on to your traditional values. And if you've lost them, I encourage you to find them again. Go do something creative. I used to paint a long time ago and I stopped. And then I went to a painting date night with my husband, and I was a little nervous because I wasn't sure which skills I still had and what I didn't have. And while I was very disappointed in how many of my skills I've lost, I also found myself thinking, wow, I'm so grateful that if I just keep doing this, I can get them again. That is the beauty of the human spirit. Until next week. So I encourage you to go find those skills, enhance your creativity, do not lose emotional control, and do not hand it over to technology. Until next week, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.